Miss Jessica said that got your attention better than my voice. So I'm going with her. Let's call the meeting to order. And we're going to try to get through these so that we can get on with some other things. Hopefully, these will not real controversial, so not like last time anyway. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senator Berg, Senator Boswell, Senator Deneen, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Higdon, Senator Meredith, Senator Smith, Senator Westerfield, Senator Williams, Senator Wilson, Chair Girdler.
Here. All right. We're going to do the pledge, and I haven't warned him yet, but Brother Mike, will you do the pledge for us, Brother Wilson? Pledge? Yes. And Brother Boswell's going to lead us in a word of prayer. Members, I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet. It's for Major General Lamberton. Wants you to come over and fly with him 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. on Monday the 13th, and we will be here. So I'm going to hand it around and sign-up sheet for that. We're going to go a little bit different than the orders so people can get back and protect us. So I'm going to take House Bill 226 first. And so Representative Bowman, will you come forward, and anybody that's with you, introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jared Ballman, Representative House District 28.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm Brigadier General Richard Charles Jones, Executive Director, Department of Military Affairs.
Good morning, Corey Ann Jackson, Department of Military Affairs, Legislative and Congressional Liaison.
Good morning, Patty Clark, Director of the Division of Mental Health within the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Cooper, the Legislative Director for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services.
Thank you all. You may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it is a privilege to be before you today with House Bill 226. I'm also proud to report that this bill has passed through both the House committee and House floor unanimously. There is no committee sub, and there is no fiscal impact. This is a very clean bill that will simply codify in state statute what is actually practiced in the field as it relates to behavioral and mental health crisis response. So it is going to, under statute, move this over to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services under the Department of Behavioral Health, away from the Department of Military Affairs. So we're going to move it into the space where we have the trained and qualified professionals to administer the services that are needed during a crisis. So with that, I will allow the other folks up here with me today to make any comments they'd wish.
Sir, what this does, this bill basically puts it where the service is at. It expedites services and keeps it out of emergency management into the provider's hands. It's more responsive. For example, where the London police officer was killed here recently, they responded to that incident and provided those services. Had it been still under emergency management, that response would not have taken place. Been your questions?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that we have been covering the KCCRT since August at this point with a memorandum from MOU from the KYEM. We had 16 responses in the early days, and in the last 2 weeks we've had 3. The latest of which was in Betsy Lane as a result of the death of a teacher. So we were able to respond and support folks as that school grieved. We've also, as the general said, we were able to have someone in London within 3 or 4 hours after that event, and able to support the individuals that were impacted as well.
Motion on the bill.
We have a motion by Senator Deneen. Any seconds? Second by Senator Byrd. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. You know, it's pretty well self-explanatory, and we appreciate that. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll? You got a question? Senator Boswell.
I'm not in favor of increasing the number of employees for different agencies. I'm concerned that as we move future on down the road, that we're going to have some rainy days, and generally speaking, I'm not really sure why we're increasing personnel in this particular department, and I don't think that the case has been made to me personally. So, without me knowing more about this bill and getting into it deeper, I'm gonna have to be a no vote on this.
You want to explain? Please?
Absolutely. So there will be no additional personnel required to accomplish what's laid out in this bill. This is simply codifying in the statute what is currently practiced today with the personnel that is in place today. And if you guys would like to speak more to that, we can.
Absolutely. So there were staffing at KYM that handled these responses, and those that they had left the positions. So those positions have been shifted. It's not new positions. It's just a shifting from where they were located previously to where they are now.
Okay, I was only responding to section 14.3 where it says the director shall employ an individual. So you're just going to transfer an individual. Okay.
That is correct, sir. That position was in
Okay.
place in KYEM, and now it's through HR. It's in place over at Behavioral Health.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Senator.
Senator Meredith.
I thank the senator from Davies for the question as well, and I don't have any problem with the intent of the bill, but I do have that growing concern about the footprint of government seeming to get bigger. I appreciate you saying that those resources will be transferred, so to speak, but shouldn't that be a provision of the bill to make sure that that funding is transferred?
Sir, that through reorganization through the cabinet is how that's worked. So initially, how we implemented this was through an MOA agreement between the two agencies that they would provide those services and take that responsibility. As previous stated, the personnel that were within KYEM doing that duty, they went away. They were mental health workers working in our office. Not a ideal fit. Put it where those personnel are managed now. Those responders that are going on the ground are volunteers that Department of Behavioral Health trains in schools on how to respond to those type disasters. So the management of them was in place anyway. So the management now, that personnel on the document goes through the personnel cabinet and will be transferred to them as a reorg within the agencies.
It will be, but we've just gone through the same thing with Senate Bill 48, which was passed out in the House today, and we did include the language, as sir, you well know, that the funding will follow as well. And I'm not suggesting anyone's doing anything underhanded, but as we prepare the budget next year, when we look at budget year to budget year, does it reflect that shifting of resources to the appropriate areas?
Sir, that's the funny thing about that funding. As you followed it initially, the funding for the positions that was KYEM was coming to the cabinet and being sent over to KYEM to provide those services. So the funding was through them all along. So it just puts it back where it was originally.
So if I look at the budget next year, there's not going to be any.
You'll see no change, sir, because it was originally funded on their budget and transferred to us. You'll see no change from either agency.
Sarah, looks like you have a comment.
Oh, I was just going to, if necessary, but the reorganization plan that we submit to the Legislative Research Commission contains that information regarding the transferring of staff from one agency to another. So that is not language in the bill, but it is a document that we share with and submit to the LRC. And that was submitted in advance of this reorganization bill.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Williams.
How do you relate with faith-based organizations? You have volunteers. Do you have them active in crisis response now?
Absolutely. We are in the process now of re-recruiting folks across the state to be active in KCCRT. Over the last couple of years, it had gotten a little inactive as we had gone through the pandemic, as we, various situations. And so we are in the process of looking at our volunteer base, identifying opportunities to recruit into those specific populations. And faith-based is definitely one of those areas that we are interested in. We absolutely understand that having that connection for those responders with their faith communities is vital for their health and well-being.
Any more questions? Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Berg. Senator Boswell. Senator Deneen. Senator Harper Angel. Senator Higdon. Senator Meredith. Senator Smith. Senator Westerfield. Senator Williams. Senator Wilson. Chair Girdler.
Aye. This bill passes with favorable expression. And if anybody would like to make a consent motion, that would be all.
Motion for consent.
Got a motion by Senator Nanine and second by Senator Westerfield. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank you,
did a
Mr.
good
Chairman.
job.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
General. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. All right. Mr. Hart, Representative Hart, if you'll get your people ready. We have to get the general back out of here so he can protect us, so we had to go him first. Thank you. Representative Hart, the floor is yours, and introduce yourself. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Representative Mark Hart, 78th House District, and I'm going to start over here on my left and let each one of my guests introduce themselves for the record.
Corey Ann Jackson, Legislative and Congressional Liaison, Department of Military Affairs.
Good morning, Jeremy Slinker, the Director of Kentucky Division of Emergency Management.
Lieutenant Doug Hargraves, Lexington Fire Department Special Operations.
Captain Ryan Hogston, Lexington Fire Department Special Operations.
The bill we got before you will help establish an urban search and rescue team for the state of Kentucky, and I'm going to turn it over to my Lieutenant Hargraves and Captain Hogston and let them give you a real brief rundown of what the bill does.
Good morning. So to give you an understanding of what urban search and rescue is, first off, right off the bat, a lot of times the name itself, urban search and rescue, really has some problems with some people. The thing is with urban search and rescue, it's a delineation from FEMA between wilderness rescue and residential rescue. That's how FEMA recognizes that. So urban is not necessarily an urban area. It's a residential style communities, things like that. It's not necessarily just wilderness in the woods, all right? But these urban search and rescue teams, what they're designed to do is an all-hazard teams. When they started back in the 90s, early 90s, their main function was building collapse, large building collapse. Over the years that you can see from Oklahoma City, from 9/11, both at the Pentagon and at the World Trade Center, at Surfside, at Mayfield, at the flooding that just happened this last summer, these teams have evolved into an all-hazard style team. These teams go across the nation, the state, and do this type of work. What we're trying to form here for this all-hazards team for Kentucky is to have a team of highly trained rescuers that are able to go and do these type of things, so we're not calling for outside agencies from other states to come and help us.
So when you look at the United States, there are 43 states that have this type of team. The closest team or state without a team is in South Dakota and such. So one of the things is we would like to have Kentucky have its own team, especially after the two biggest disasters we've had. With that, we kind of envision 10 regional teams. It's very hard for us here, the responders, to get to the western side of the state. So we would definitely like to have 10 regional teams, and those regional teams will be in the current EM regions. And then also having two larger teams that are type 1 and a type 3 that follow the FEMA guidelines.
So a little bit of the, a little bit of the history of USAR in Kentucky. Right after 9/11, UASI federal funds were given to major departments like Louisville and Lexington to start these type of teams. In 2010 was a real team effort amongst all the bigger cities to bring these type of teams together. That's where it started in 2010. So as of right now, we have over 180 specially trained technical rescue team members throughout the state of Kentucky. These are range from anywhere from Paducah, Bowling Green to Ashland, Somerset, Louisville, Lexington. We're really going everywhere in the state to get these cream of the crop, as we're looking for the special responders. This isn't just an ordinary firefighter that would be, or an ordinary police officer that would, your regular run-of-the-mill public safety officer. These are the elite people that are a part of these teams. These are the people that come together when the disaster strikes, and we're the responders that respond to that.
All right. Jeremy Slinker with Emergency Management. And so we fully support the endeavor of creating a urban search and rescue team at a statewide level. We base that on not speculation any longer. Unfortunately, we've had a couple, record-setting, monumental, unprecedented, name the adjective, disasters. And in those, I can tell you that in each, the tornadoes of December of 2021 and the floods of July of 2022, 4 urban search and rescue teams were deployed into Kentucky. So federal teams from out of state came into Kentucky to perform rescue operations. And I will testify as too that it would have been challenging if they haven't. So what this does, it establishes a team here in Kentucky under emergency management, which already has search and rescue statute 39F in KRS. And so it would just, we feel like it's a great fit to come under our existing 39F search and rescue statute. And we've made it clear in our early talks, we have over 100 local search and rescue teams. And this in no way, I want to be clear, replaces those. And our endeavor would be that this would be an enhancement to those. They're always going to be the key. They're the first. They're the less than an hour response, because those are the keys to those local communities. So we have to take this great training and better equipment and share with them and make sure they're enhanced. But then this gives us the response time for me between that local team being on scene and a federal out-of-state team. There's some time frame in there that this team would be able to come in and fill in a matter of, say, 2 hours or 3 hours instead of 6 to 12. So I think our most recent history has proven It's needed. We would be proud to help facilitate it, take the great plan that these subject matter experts put into it, work in the interim with many of our stakeholders that would be interested in this, and develop a great plan of how that looks under a state team.
I have a, we may be able to dig into it deeper because I got about 4 people's got questions. And that way they can dig into what you're wanting to do.
We're good.
Go ahead.
No, go. If you got questions, we can go ahead and start taking questions.
Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. We talk about the disasters we've had, and I've heard nothing but accolades about the response from our folks, and really never heard of any major problems. I mean, obviously we had some, unfortunately had deaths, but the responders were there and did their job.
To kind of give you an example on that, one of the goals of doing this type of team for our state is to get more of a rapid response. There was a couple situations where some people were trapped, hung on to the side of a building and stuff, and the gentleman that responded down there, they can correct me if I'm wrong on this. First boots on the ground of outside agencies that was able to get in to help the local rescuers was about 12 hours. We had some deaths occur within an 8-hour time frame because we couldn't get rescues to them. So this would be an effort to get more resources and more responders into the local areas to assist your local rescue and first responders, because they were just completely overtaxed. They didn't have the ability to get there soon. And the other thing that we're wanting to establish with this, all the surrounding states that come in and help us, they've got a team. If we ever had a major earthquake on the Madrid Fault, we're not going to be, right now we kind of rely on them teams for backup. We're not going to be able to do that if that happens, and this would give us our own resource in the state.
Do these individuals, are they still out in the state doing other work, and they come together when there's a disaster?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, for example, I'm a member of Ohio Task Force 1 also, but I'm a firefighter with Lexington Fire Department. So whenever a disaster happens, they do a alerting system for us, and I get rostered with Ohio Task Force. So I am a member of the Lexington Fire Department, but I'm also a member of another team, and my department allows me to go.
One other question, I'll stop. But under fiscal note, when it looks at the cost of this, it says indeterminable, and I always gets really
I knew I was going to get that question.
I do not like the word interminable.
Well, there's no physical
indeterminable.
There's no physical note with this bill, because this bill will allow us to establish or allow emergency management to promulgate the regulations, establish the framework, and create, for lack of a better term, the division within the division to do this. And they're going to report back to us in December. And with their reporting back to us, they're going to be able to tell us more accurately how much money this is going to cost on a yearly basis, how much personnel they're going to need. And at that point, I've been working with Chairman Petrie over in the House A&R Committee. We will have a funding bill next year, or it'll be part of the budget bill of how to fund this. But there's no funding in this bill, and it's indeterminate because we've got to promulgate the regulations and build the framework.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Deneen.
Thank you, Chairman. I look at a map around the United States, and Kentucky is an oasis, and it's just really everybody around us has a response team. There's only, if my count is correct, there is only 6 states in the entire United States that does not have one. We're one of the 6. In light of the recent tragedies in western and eastern Kentucky, and I only hope that we don't have those again. But time matters. Responding in a timely manner saves lives. And I hate to think that we have to rely on some team coming out of Indianapolis, out of St. Louis, out of Memphis, Tennessee, to assist us to save Kentuckians. So with that said, I appreciate you bringing the bill, and I look forward to hearing more over the interim and in next year's session about the funding apparatus. I do have my concerns about that, but looking at the bill the way it is now, I am in favor of developing this framework because I believe it's needed here in the Commonwealth.
Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here and for your bill. We have a search and rescue team in Bowling Green, one of the 100 that you mentioned. Very good team. Of course, we experienced the tornadoes, and per capita, it didn't seem like much because we're the third largest city, but it was probably larger than people realize, the loss that happened there. I do have a concern with creating this without, the funding, because I know next year, like you said, we're going to be requesting money without an idea of how much it's going to cost us. So that concerns me. I'd rather see a full plan laid out as you do in business with what you're expecting to spend and what it's going to cost us. So to me, that's a really big part that's missing in this legislation. And so that does concern me. Although I agree, with having a rapid response team, I would much rather see a complete plan rather than just partial plan. We'll create it and then we'll fund it when it comes around. We don't even know what that is when it comes to the priorities that we have to fund in our state.
I don't disagree with your sentiment, but unless we can, the whole purpose of doing this in a two-bill process or a two-session process is because if we can give them the time to look at the resources that they have that we can put into this without having to expend more money, as well as looking at what we're going to need to bring in new, it's going to give us a more accurate. Anything that we do right now is just an estimate. But by December and over the interim, if this bill passes, we hope to be able to develop an accurate so when I can come back into you when we're working on the budget next year and say, this is what this is going to cost. Right now, all I'm going to do is be able to give you estimates, and so that's why we decided to take this approach.
Well, again, you're putting it in statute, and once it's in statute, that's something we have to fund, or we choose not to.
Well, and it's you can kind of look back at the way we did charter schools. We put charter schools in statute, and then we funded it the funding mechanism come in at a later date. That's kind of where we got the idea for this. I understand your concern, but overall, we all know that if the funding's not there next year, this ain't going to happen. But we've got to get the figures down to where I know how much money to ask for, and that was my goal and my intent.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
Senator Meredith.
Thank you. I actually support this legislation. I think, you prepare for the worst and you pray for the best. And that's, coming out of healthcare, that's just how I've been taught. I do have a question. When we have other states send us their search and rescue teams, do we reimburse them?
Okay, so the quick answer is yes. Now, the ones that have deployed into Kentucky in our last two disasters were federally funded search and rescue teams. So we'll have a cost share with that. It won't be free, but the federal government does cover 75% of that, and then we'll cover the other 25 unless it falls in the 100% covered 30 days. So, and a lot of times it does under emergency procedures. But if we used our EMAC system, the Emergency Management Assistance Compact is how you ask assistance from other states, then yes, there's an upfront contract of how much that team will cost and then what the state of Kentucky would reimburse that state.
So do we have an estimate on what we paid other states to provide this service for us during our last two major crises in the state?
The last two major, the 8 teams that came in, and actually it's 4 and 4 on both disasters, and they were the same teams of the surrounding states. They were the federal teams. So the federal, we may have paid some on the cost share, but the federal aid paid for the majority of that percentage.
Senator Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's not about the money, but it's about the money. I share Senator Wilson's concerns, and certainly the intent of this is spot on. But you've given us some preliminary numbers, and it looks like appropriation could be $26 million with ongoing cost of $3 million a year. Will a general fund appropriation be the only source of funding for this program?
We do have some opportunities in our EMPG grant, Emergency Management Preparedness Grant, and search and rescue is a project under that. So I can't tell you it goes from year to year how much we would have, but we will continue to have that project in that grant, and there's potentially some areas that we could apply to that. Again, the numbers you're citing is from our subject matter experts that said if there were no grant sources, there were no other state resources, and that's where I think that number will be different. There will be resources in the state already that we can call on that will take away some of that as well. That is the best case scenario with no other assistance. But I think through the planning process, we'll really fine tune that and hone that down to exactly what we need. And I also have learned over my career to do this entire plan that figure is based on. I don't see that as a 1 or 2 year plan. Like to go from one type 1 team to a type 3 and regional team, I see that multiple years, and I would predict that would be over multiple biennium budget cycles too. So I feel like, without the proof in the pudding today, but I feel like the ask next year would be much different than that.
Well, I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish here. This isn't without precedent. I think we have a trauma system that was established several years ago that never has been funded. So I support what you're attempting to do, but I just want some assurance, I guess, that this is not a promise of an appropriation. I really think this next budget cycle may be the most challenging that at least I've faced in my 7 years here. 8 years, will be 8 years next year. It's going to be a tough budget with inflation hitting us, and I'm sure we've got hundreds of groups coming to us right now in anticipation of this next budget saying we need more money. So this is going to be a challenge. Again, not to dampen the spirit of this or the intent of your bill, but just want to make sure we're all on board that we certainly can't promise anything at this point in time, but this does give you the mechanism that you need to, if the appropriation there, to let it happen. So.
Yeah, and we understand that. And as you guys, this will be my 8th year next year, and I know, being on the A&R committee, I'm well aware of what you're all talking about, and I know it's going to be very challenging, but hopefully we can accomplish it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Boswell.
Mr. Chairman, I want to apologize because as I was looking at the order of what we were going to discuss today, I had a misunderstanding. So the things I said earlier, never mind. My concern was about this. And around 1995, I was a county commissioner in Davis County, and someone came to our court and asked us to consider hiring a part-time EMS person. They were going to help us out with some of our radio problems because they were expert in that field. And they also were going to help us with our tornado sirens, which we thought was a good idea. So just a couple of questions. Now let's fast forward about 30 years or whatever it was. That was a very small amount out of our budget at that time. What is the total state approximate EMS budget today? It's split between the cities and the state and the counties. I think the state picks up 80% and the counties pick up roughly 20. Is that right?
I'm going to let EM Director Slinker address this probably maybe in more detail, but to my knowledge, there's not a state EMS team, so I'm not real sure how to.
I'm talking about each county has EMS, right? Emergency
Yes.
Disaster Services. Do we have an approximation of what that is today?
For EMS, or
Right.
are you talking about EMA?
I'm talking about EMS. Is that Disaster and Emergency Services?
Okay, that was okay.
DES.
Okay, your EMAs is the terminology. When you said EMS, I was thinking emergency medical services.
Yeah.
And so I was a little confused, but I'll let
Disaster and Emergency Services.
that's Colonel Slinker's area, and I'll let him.
Senator, I apologize if I don't have the exact number. I just didn't bring the budget numbers with me. But you are spot on. So generally, every county has an emergency management director or emergency management officer. Some are part-time, some are full-time, some is emergency management staff, and some is just one person that does multiple county jobs as well. Some cover the county, some cover the city. So under that emergency management preparedness grant, through Kentucky Emergency Management, we provide them what the state gets. We provide the counties 50% of that, and then also pay the workman's comp coverage for that. So if we're, say our grant that year was $3 million, we would send $1.5 million to the counties. And then, like I said, there'd be about 150 to 200 that would cover workman's comp for search and rescue and other emergency management operations. So we do cover 50% of those local operating costs.
So in the event of an emergency, we have city police, we have the sheriff department, we have Kentucky State Police, we have rural fire departments, we have trained volunteers, we have National Guard, we have Red Cross. I just don't know what's going to end as far as how we need to continue to add on to management, disaster and emergency services and emergency response teams. It seems like that we've gone from nothing to way too much. So I'm concerned about the cost and what we're going to do in the future. So thank you.
All right. I entertain a motion. Motion on the bill, Senator Meredith, second by Senator Deneen. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Berg,
Explain my I vote. I vote aye. I really appreciate y'all for bringing this. And I just want to put a buzz in people's ears. I was at one point radiation safety officer for Robley Rex VA. And I'll be honest, our radiation safety response programs in this state are lacking significantly. So I just want to remind people that that's something for us to be working on in the future. Thank you.
Senator Boswell. No. Senator Deneen.
Aye.
Senator Harper Angel. Senator Higdon.
Mr. Chairman, explain my past vote. Representative Hart, it's a great bill, and I think it's something we need to talk about. And training and having well-trained people and well-equipped and having a plan is very important. I'm just concerned about that indeterminable amount of money. That bothers me. So I'm not going to vote no, but I will pass.
Senator Meredith. Senator Smith. Senator Westerfield. Senator Williams. Senator Wilson.
Pass.
Chair Girdler.
Aye. This passes, but we can't put it on consent. We may see if Deneen will handle it on the floor for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Representative Lewis. And then bring anybody of your guests. Representative Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Derek Lewis, State Representative of the 90th House District, representing Clay, Leslie, and Laurel counties. I'll let my guests introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Whitney Allen, U.S. Army retired, Commissioner for Kentucky Department of Veteran Affairs.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Al Duncan, Division Director, State Veteran Cemeteries. Sir.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm National Legislative Director for all the state departments of Veterans Affairs, former commissioner, and I'm here to support the legislation.
And your
Thank-
name?
Les Beaver, sir.
All right. Go ahead, Representative Lewis.
Thank you all for having us today. So we have 5 veteran cemeteries in Kentucky. One is in my district in Leslie County. Kentucky has what's called a residency requirement, meaning to be interred there, you have to have been a resident of Kentucky. Now, myself, I believe if you proudly served our country, you should be able to be laid to rest wherever you want to be, but that's not the reason to do this bill. Mr. Duncan had reached out to me earlier this year. Going forward in the future, if we do not remove the residency requirement, so simply striking out the word Kentucky, we're not adding anything, just simply striking out the word Kentucky. If we do not do this, we will not be eligible for some federal funds in the future. This would cost our state between $10 to $20 million, and no one has reached out to me with any opposition. I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Sorry. We do have a question from Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I understand the idea of federal funds, but usually federal funds are one-time funds. Is that correct?
I defer to my guest.
Senator Wilson, yes and no. In 2000, we entered into a memorandum of understanding and a memorandum of agreement with the National Cemetery Administration to build all 5 of our state veteran cemetery. During that time, they gave us $40.5 million to build those 5. With that being said, we follow their rules on interment, just like a national cemetery. So as our cemeteries grow, we go back to them and they give us the money for expansion of those cemeteries. 100% fully funded. State of Kentucky doesn't have to pay a dime. Whenever, for example, in Kentucky Veteran Cemetery West in Hopkinsville, I am adding 2,000 pre-placed burial crypts right now. That's a $2.5 million grant from the federal National Cemetery Administration, State Cemetery Grants Program. They give us that money, we do it. With this bill that's going on now is the National Cemetery Administration in 2020 came to us and said all state veteran cemeteries have to lose their residency requirement or they will lose the opportunity to get any more expansion grants money. So with that being said, January of 2025, if we do not lose this by then, we will lose all of that grant money going forward. And over the next 10 years, we will be asking for up to $20 million in grants. I have 1 grant going right now. I have 2 grants going next year for $7 million. That's what they do. That's how the project is designed. So let's let them pay for it the way it's supposed to be paid instead of us having to come to you and ask you for that money.
That could also change with a new administration too as well, correct?
Not necessarily. That is in the
Statute.
The statute, and I'll turn that over to the National Legislative Liaison.
Sir, the Veteran Cemetery Grant Program is a federal statute program. The funds are appropriated every year. Currently, this FY23, the federal funds are $50 million. There are $60 million of expansion grants already submitted, and Kentucky is one of them. So we are pushing for more federal funding in that program because at the current status, they can't build any new cemeteries because that's priority group 2. So this is great benefit for the state of Kentucky. Fortunately, we established our 5 state cemeteries early, and those states that didn't are now sitting waiting to get federal grant funds to build their cemeteries. The goal behind this is that 95% of all veterans will be within 75 miles and their eligible family members of a state or a national cemetery. That's the national goal. And as chairman of that advisory committee and working with the Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs, that's a national status on that.
So if we take this off, a veteran or a veteran's spouse or dependent child could actually be buried here in Kentucky from any state in the United States, correct?
Yes, sir. And what that does is that follows the National Cemetery Administration's rules. We have 125 national cemeteries, 115 state veteran cemeteries. And their goal is any veteran, any state. So that, and that's the reason why they pay for it. They give us the money for the expansions.
Senator Wilson, right now, Kentucky's the only state in our region that has not dropped the residency. Two, we're one of the few remaining states, less than a dozen, to drop as well. And in my opinion, a veteran is a veteran. Many veterans across the state that holds Florida residency is from Kentucky. Their kids are here. They may want their father or mother back. So please take that in consideration. So this is open. It's always been open for veterans across our nation. The residency just it just says Kentucky.
So if I was living outside the state and I had been born in Kentucky and I was a veteran, I'd be eligible to come back and be buried now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so the connection to Kentucky, if they have family ties to Kentucky and are a veteran living outside, they're still eligible to be buried here. Correct?
The way it works, sir, is when we say a connection to Kentucky, that's someone that must have joined the military in Kentucky, lived in Kentucky, served in the military in Kentucky, pay state taxes in Kentucky, things of those natures. And I would say this, I think I understand where you're going. Is that going to open the floodgates for people to come in? No, I do not believe so. And here's the reason why I say that, sir. Kentucky Veteran Cemetery West in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, with the amount of property that we have and the amount of services that they do on a monthly basis, they have the capacity for 143 years. So they're not going to come in and flood our state and fill up that cemetery from Tennessee in a couple of weeks. And each one of our cemeteries are built that way. We have expansions of 99 acres at some of these cemeteries to go up to. The problem will be if we do not remove this and we cannot get the federal grants to move forward with those cemeteries, then we have all the property but no money to expand. Then we would have to come back to you guys and ask you for $7, $10, $12 million to expand those cemeteries.
And Senator Wilson, I'm sorry for interrupting, we have the support of the Joint Executive Council of Veteran Organization, the 23, 24 members that represent all the major veteran service organizations in the state. We brought in Glenn Powers from the National Cemetery Administration to brief everyone on this, to understand why this is important. And then as you can see, General Beavers here as well that represent Kentucky on a national level and respect it. So yes, Al is correct. We would not be overrun, but if you want to look at our cemetery and if you're really concerned about the capacity, look at a gas tank, E to F, and you know how it's broken down in quarters. Right now, for capacity, we're at 75% at best, 3/4 of a tank, with the vehicle still parked in the parking lot, just going down, getting ready to go to the gas station 1 mile down the road. So we have a lot of capacity, but we don't have funding to expand that. So if there's a concern for anybody in the committee of being overwhelmed, that is not the case. If you're concerned about Kentucky veterans here, National Guard reservists, or somebody who is adopted Kentuckian coming from out of Louisiana, you will be buried here. Their family members will be buried here. So that is not a problem. That's something that'll be past my daughter's kids' generation. And if we run out, we can always either get donated land or buy space. Thank you.
I have one scenario that I'm kind of looking at in 2022 was the Kentucky Veterans Cemetery Central. And they had a 30-day backup of being able to bury the people that were buried there. Had to ask us for money to hire some people that could alleviate that, but it still took half as long to get all those burials.
And the reason why that was, sir, was we lost a lot of our residential experts. They quit on us at that cemetery. I had to replace a 17-year cemetery manager at that cemetery. So my staff had shrank. I could not get staff. Once I did get staff, the number was 30. We had to cut back on services so that I could get that staff up to speed. I had to hire more staff. We've done that. The ABR that we presented last year, we hired 8 caretakers across all 5 of our cemeteries. And right now, that cemetery is less than 10 days for a service to get into that. And that is about the national average, because the national average is the first 72 hours after someone dies. That's part of that count. So we're less than 7 days for that. And the problem with I understand what you're saying about the money aspect and the individual, but a lot of that came from the COVID era because we lost most of our staff at that cemetery.
And also, sir, we adjusted our tactics. Now, I'm very proud of my guys and my team throughout KDVA. We run the numbers, we plan, we strategize. I mean, I have gentlemen back here, like my chief of staff and my executive director of veteran services, have put people in other countries. So we have the talent there. And remember, the cemeteries are small teams. Probably the largest team is what, 10, 12 at best? Al?
16 in Radcliffe now.
Radcliffe's, that's the biggest team. Everyone is much smaller. So it's a small investment in salaries to make sure we get $21 million in the next 10 years and millions of dollars of grants that'll be put in contractors' pocket, Kentuckian contractors. So I do understand the concern of demand and overflow, but I have a great team. We forecast. If there's a problem or there's a change, we will come to you with a plan from there.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. But and I'm a veteran, 8.5 years in the United States Marine Corps, and certainly served with the guys that live all over the United States. But I'm thinking about my Kentucky veterans. I know Jevco did vote to refrain from opposing this.
They voted to support, sir. We have a letter. Al has the copy right here. We have the full support. I know there's onesies and twosies out there,
Yes.
but like I said, veterans are veterans, and we're not in any danger of losing capacity. We have 99 years of capacity at each of the cemeteries, and it will not change anytime soon.
Senator Higdon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Short
I'll be
and sweet.
brief. Commissioner Allen, thank you for your service and you're always being there if a veteran in Kentucky needs assistance. And I encourage my committee members, if you ever have a veterans issue, email Commissioner Allen. And
Thank you, sir.
He or his staff is on the issue right away. And I'm good to hear we had an agreement that I know last year we talked about this and there was not an agreement. One quick question though. We get federal grants for the purchasing of ground. What about operations? Is that do we receive anything from the federal government for operations?
Yes, sir. Each veteran that is buried in our state veteran cemeteries, we receive a plot allowance from the federal government. This year, that plot allowance is $893. That comes back to us, and it goes into that cemetery's account to where we use that for operational money.
Okay. Of course, that does. I guess we do budget money for operations.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Running short on time. We need a motion.
We've already got them.
Oh, you got the motion. Oh, let's take a vote. Or I went to sleep up here.
Senator Berg.
Aye.
Senator Boswell. Aye. Senator Deneen.
Aye.
Senator Harper Angel. Senator Higdon. Aye. Senator Meredith. Aye. Senator Smith. Senator Westerfield. Senator Williams. Aye. Senator Wilson. Pass. Chair Girdler.
Aye. No consent, but we can, I think we'll get this through on the floor. So thank you all for presenting.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you.
I know it. Representative Bray.
We have 2 people signed up to this.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is always good to be over here in the Senate. Today I have before you House Bill 153. This passed out of the House earlier this year on a bipartisan basis. The concept behind it's pretty simple. It says going forward, no State tax dollars, state manpower will be allocated towards the enforcement of a federal firearm ban. Regulations after January the 1st, 2021.
Got a motion, need a second? Second, Senator Williams. All right. I've got two people who want to speak against it. I'm gonna give, if they're together, they can come up here and I'm gonna give you about 3 minutes. Terry Carter and Chuck Eddy.
Thank you. My name is Terry Carter. I'm a citizen. And I have a lot of questions about this bill, but mainly this week, a federal judge ruled that Missouri's nullification law, the so-called Second Amendment Preservation Act, is unconstitutional. This is exactly what is being presented today, to my understanding. If you simply Google the Missouri nullification law and law enforcement, you will find story after story from across Missouri where law enforcement officers are seeking clarification from courts and explaining how it makes it difficult for them to do their jobs. For example, a November 2021 report by the Kansas City Star states, concerned local police chiefs have also reacted to the law by withdrawing from partnerships largely unrelated to guns. These include drug task forces covering multiple jurisdictions that receive federal funding but are run by the state. I live in a mostly rural county, like many other counties in Kentucky. I talk to my local police department regularly. I have lunch with them every month. I don't see where this helps my community. I don't see where this helps make anyone safer. I don't see where this helps my police department, who I love. They don't need this. They need better pay. They need more officers. They need help. But I have not heard a single thing today or read anything in this bill that helps them. Please vote no.
I'm Chuck Eddy. I'm a citizen. I want to second what Terry Carter said. The Missouri ruling, or the ruling in the Missouri bill, means we're going to spend money defending this bill, and in the end, it will not survive, because the supremacy clause means that what's passed federally is going to supersede what's passed here. Additionally, I want to again direct your attention to Justice Scalia's majority opinion in District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008, the ruling that basically says I can have guns for my own protection. I can possess them. Like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. For example, concealed weapons prohibitions have been upheld under the amendment or state analogs. The court's opinion should not be taken to cast doubt on longstanding prohibition on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. Miller's holding that the sorts of weapons protected are those in common use at the time find support in historical tradition of prohibiting the carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons. So on the federal level, there will be laws passed. But because of the supremacy clause, if we try to say, no, we're not going to enforce those, then we're going to spend millions of dollars, and in the end, we will fail. I heard the Missouri AG, I think it was, said he hoped to have a better hearing in the circuit court. The fact of the matter is, if these bills go all the way up to the Supreme Court, there may be hope from some people that with the current configuration of the court, that they would automatically say, yeah, Kentucky, you don't have to follow this nasty federal law. The fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court is not going to blow up the federal Constitution to allow individual states to say, nah, we don't want to follow this.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. I'm going to let him come back up, Representative Bray. You got 1 minute, and then we're going to have to get on with it. All right. Let Senator Berg ask a question real quick.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I have a question. We have, as I'm sure you are well aware, and have been fighting for many, many years, a horrendous opioid crisis in this state. And the absolute first line of defense is to get the opioids off the street, out of people's homes and away from where they can hurt themselves with it. Why, in this case, when we have a tremendous, extraordinarily costly epidemic of gun violence in this state, are you advocating for more guns rather than less? That seems antithetical to what we are doing with the opioid crisis and what honestly we do with most medical crises in this state. Could you explain your thought process on that to me, sir?
Absolutely. So I don't equate the opioid crisis and the gun violence epidemic in the same vein. The opioid crisis stems from addiction. The gun violence epidemic stems from a lack of respect for the human life. As far as this not protecting or like, there's nothing, as far as gun regulations go, the way I see it, there's nothing from a federal standpoint as far as, let's just talk about the pistol ban brace that's ongoing right now. The federal government has determined, they have re-examined an existing interpretation to make this firearm accessory illegal. Without a single legislative vote cast, they've just determined that that something that was legal for years is now illegal, just through a reg interpretation. That's not going to solve a single violent gun crime issue. I mean, murder's already illegal. Possession of a firearm by a felon is already illegal. But what it's going to stop is it's going to stop people with disabilities or people like my wife who, I frequently have to be up here, so she's at home alone. It's going to stop her from being able to defend herself or her family as she sees fit. That's the purpose of the bill.
All right, we got a motion and a second. I'm going to ask Mr. Secretary call the roll, and then we can explain our yes or no votes. All right, thank you.
Senator Berg.
I would like to explain my no vote, sir. We have estimates in this state that each gunshot wound is costing our state money from Kentucky. This is not federal money. $500,000. Each murder is costing our state $900,000. Do the math. On a bad weekend in this state, we can be spending $6, $7, $8 million. And that's not solving anything. That is just to fix the problem that was already created.
Thank you.
Opioids have created a tremendous problem in this state. And what we did was limit their access. That is the best way to begin to solve that problem.
Thank you, Mr.
There is no difference here, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Senator Boswell.
I explain my vote. I wrote on it. We have a president who's trying to usurp our rights, and we're not going to let that happen.
Senator Deneen. Senator Harper Angel. Senator Higdon. Senator Meredith. Senator Smith. Senator Westerfield. Senator Williams. Senator Wilson. Chair Girdler.
Aye. This passes, and you need to get somebody to do it on the floor. Thank you. All right. Representative Witten. hopefully this goes pretty quick. I was supposed to be at a meeting at 10 o'clock.
We couldn't do a consent order. On this
No,
one.
not on this. Yeah, we can. You may proceed.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For introductions, my name is Susan Tyler Witten. I'm state representative for District 31.
Make a motion to be approved.
We got a motion. Got a second, Senator Meredith. I believe we ought to call a roll.
Senator Berg. Senator Boswell. Senator Deneen. Senator Harper Angel. Senator Higdon.
Pass.
Senator Meredith. Senator Smith. Senator Westerfield. Senator Williams. Senator Wilson. Chair Girdler.
Aye. This passes. Can't go on consent. We will let you get somebody to do it on the floor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry we had to cut it short, but we only got this room rented till 10 o'clock, and they're going to charge us double rent. We're going to try to have a meeting next Thursday, and possibly the bills that will run next Thursday will have their second reading, and so that way we can present them on the floor Thursday, and so that way if we've got 4 or 5 bills we need to pass, we'll do that. A little bit on the opioid, and if we close the southern border, the fentanyl thing would go away too. So there's political things in all this that goes on, but fentanyl is one that's killing us. So thank you all.